Oh, wait a minute, I got to point to this. Again, as I said, the Wilmington Historical Society was assistance in putting this together. The first slide we're looking at here is of what I would call our founders. You're seeing standing back towards the fire place is my father. My father was a businessman up here in the North Country. He operated several automotive dealerships, and in the late 40s, he was selected by then Governor Dewey to serve on the first first equal opportunity bill in our nation, which of course New York State is where it was started. So he worked on that commission for several years. The work, of course, he did was more downstate. He didn't have those too many problems up here for him to be involved in. So he had moved the family down to Bayshore, Long Island. At that time, I was serving in the United States Navy, and that's significant because if that hadn't happened, we might not be here today, and I'll tell you how that came about in a minute. Seated next to my father is Arto Monaco. I know many of you know Arto. Arto is a unique individual and a treasure of the North Country, not just for his tremendous artistic talents and creativity, but also for the person that he was. And so Arto and his wife Brad never had any children. Everybody sort of thought of him as Uncle Arto, and the children just loved him because he never lost the sight, the ability to look at the world the way children do. And that imagination and creativity and so forth you see in all books. In the brown tunic is Harold Fortune. Harold Fortune was an individual who had recently done the Seabees in World War II, and he had some construction equipment, and particularly he was handy at building log buildings. He had experience in doing that, and when it finally evolved that they were going to have log construction, and it was going to be the style of the buildings here, they were looking for someone who knew something about that, and they found Harold, so he joined the team. Now Harold brought more than just his construction skills. He also brought a tremendous enthusiasm and also a lot of creativity. He contributed tremendously to the public relations and promotion activities in the park. He was a person that had the ability to see the opportunity and then jump, grab it. A story I like to tell about Harold was a thing he got away with it several times, frankly, they got wise to him. But we had this big long float, and we used to take it out to parades and other events, and it had replicas of all the buildings on it with poles hanging up in the middle. And driving up to the center of Lake George, he managed to have a flat tire. And of course they had forgotten to bring the spare. So they had to leave that float sit there all day Saturday while somebody went up to the pole and got a spare tire and fixed the thing so he could drive on. He found that that worked pretty good because all of the visitors there were asking about this. So every so often, for some reason or another, I can never understand it, but that float truck would get a flat tire right there in the short. So that's the kind of guy he was, and I enjoy that little bit of the story. Okay, now proceeding to the next, I keep forgetting I'm going to point this way. This is a picture that shows my father on the left, and on the right on the horse is my sister Patty, and that gives me the opportunity at this point in time to tell you the stories where the idea came from. As I told you, my father had moved the family down to Bayshore, Long Island, yet they still had the home in Lake Placid, and for the Christmas holidays, we certainly wanted to celebrate those in Long Island. You were going to come up to Lake Placid where you could really get the feel of it. So they were driving up, and we were a fairly large family, and my driving one car, my father was driving the station wagon. It had all the skis and sleds and all that stuff in it, and along with our youngest sister Patty, who was there about 5 years old. And she asked to be told a story. She always asked to be told a story. That was a great story. So he had this character he talked about called Baby Bear. And Baby Bear had all kinds of episodes and adventures and so forth. And, inspired, no doubt, by the Christmas season, driving through the villages long before the North Way, driving from village to village along Route 9 with all their decorations and lights out, probably inspired him to tell a story about the little bear who had wandered away from home. It was in the winter, he was in the woods, he was lost, he was cold, he was hungry, and very frightened. And he happened to come upon this little village, it was clearing in the forest, and around this was big buildings, and there was all these people running around, so very, very busy. And he came in there, and they took care of them, they gave them food, they kept them warm, and so forth. And they were so nice to him. He said, "Hey, isn't there something I can do here? Can I contribute to this, what you're doing here? Can I be a part of this village?" And I said, "Well, you'll have to ask our head man about that." And I said, "Well, where do I find him?" "Well, he's over there in that place." So the Baby Bear goes in and finds, of course, this man in a red suit with a white beard, and asks permission to be in the village. And Santa scratched his head and said, "Well, gee, I don't know what I can have you do here." And he happened to look out, and there was the North Pole, and it was in pretty sad shape. They'd been so busy making toys and gifts for the children that nobody had done any maintenance on the pole and the whole thing. It looked terrible. So Santa said, "Well, there's what you can do." So he gave him materials he needed, including a brush and a big white paint, and sent him out there to clean up the North Pole and make it white. And he did. And of course, he was very enthusiastic and very happy, and just full of energy in doing this, and got a little bit carried away. And as the paint went on the pole, as much went on the pole as went on him. And that's where the first pole was. Okay, well, that was the story. My sister says, "Well, that's nice, take me there too." And Dad had to tell her that, "No, there's no roads up there, there's no train service, I can't fly my plane because there's no airport in there." And so Patty said, "Well, that's too bad, because that would be the most fun ever to visit Santa." And she shortly after fell asleep with my father began to think, wouldn't that be a fun thing to be able to do? And that's the story as to how the idea came about. The gentleman in the middle is my grandfather. And he played a very significant role too. When my dad first first got this idea, he sort of turned it over his head for a few years. He was not an artist. He knew what he wanted, but he couldn't make a sketch of it or a drawing of it to get the feel of it. And he needed to find somebody who could do that. And it took him a couple of years before finally he made a connection with Arto Monaco. And Arto has frequently told me the story of how that came about, the first meeting between the two of them. It seems my father, as I told you, was an automobile dealer, and it was his habit to drive any of the old used cars that were on the lot. That's what he used for joint transportation. The cars he drove were what we call a clunker today, and probably get a nice reward for bringing it in. But at that time, it's what he used. He also wasn't inclined to dress as sportly as his father did. His father was a man, an industrialist in New York City, very successful in the tailoring field and also in the finance field, and who had a goodly amount of money. Dad usually walked around in a baggy old suit. He's dressed up today probably because his father's watching, but usually he wasn't dressed up quite that well. When Arto saw this man come in and started to hear what the man wanted to do, he said, "You know, this is going to cost a lot of money." And so Dad said, "Well, you get me the drawings, and I'll find the money." And of course, that's where the money came from. So he did play a part in our. Here, I keep forgetting